What is one thing the Sonic franchise is known for? Speed. With every Sonic game released, the focus of each game has always been the speed of the fast hedgehog, or in some cases, hedgehogs. Well, and with this speed-based gameplay in Sonic games that we all know and love, what would work well with a speedy character all about going fast? If you said racing games, then my gosh, that's genius! The idea of Sonic the Hedgehog doing racing games is obviously a no-brainer, right? I mean, a fast character doing races makes about as much sense as God of War having the boat scene, makes as much sense as Donkey Kong Country having bananas. So with that stated, has there been any Sonic racing games? Well, of course there are. This video wouldn't exist if there wasn't. There have been a number of Sonic the Hedgehog racing games released throughout the years, going from the 90s all the way to now. But unlike other racing games for franchises like Mario, where you stick to kart racers, Sonic has done multiple different types of racing games over the years. There have been the highest of highs with these games, and the lowest of lows. Of course there has. It's Sonic. What do you expect? And with Sonic Racing Crossworlds being the newest Sonic racing game to release post-comeback era of Sonic, I figured today it'd be fun to take a look back at the Sonic racing games released in previous years and go over the rise and the downfall of Sonic the Hedgehog racing games. And to get us started, we gotta go back to March 18th, 1994 with the release of Sonic Drift. Oh geez, quite the start.
The concept of fun is totally happening right now.
Releasing March 18th, 1994 for the Game Gear, Sonic Drift would be the first Sonic racing game to ever release in the Sonic series. And for this being the first racing game... Oh my, hold on a second. Stop me, please! Put something else on in the background. Anything but this OSTs, please. I can't even hear myself.
All right, fine. Here.
So Sonic Drift, this would be one of the many Sonic Game Gear games to release in the 90s, and as said previously, this would be the first Sonic racing game of the series. And for this being the first racing game of the series, oh boy, this is a rough start. So to talk about the obvious elephant in the room, Sonic isn't a flippin' car. Now unless you're very unfamiliar with Sonic, allow me to explain. You see Sonic here, you press a button, he goes fast. You got that? Good. So in case you are unaware, let me ask a question. Why the heck is Sonic in a car? Look, I get that most other franchises that did racing games back then, they got a kart racer, but here's the thing. Sonic doesn't need a car to go fast like Mario or Crash Bandicoot. Sonic can go just as, if not faster, on foot than in a car. But it's not that big of a deal because this was just a simple little Game Gear spin-off game that they made back then just to keep all the Sonic momentum going at the time. The actual game itself, yeah, this is pretty bad. When the game was released, it received mixed to pure negative reviews, mainly because this game is just not good nor fun to play. Not many people really like this game, if any at all. It's really just a Sonic game that exists and nobody really cares about. Also, it's hard to play a game when you have this excuse of an OST in the background! All in all, Sonic Drift, while a very rough start for the Sonic racing games, it certainly exists alright. So after this game, the next game that Sega would release less than a year later would be, okay, this must have been when Sega just said screw it, release whatever. So under a year of the release of the first game, on March 17th, 1995, Sonic Drift 2 would make its way onto the Game Gear to be the second Sonic racing game in the series, and... at least the soundtrack is somewhat better here. Sonic Drift 2 is kind of the same thing with Drift 1, just a Game Gear Sonic game that pretty much exists. It really isn't all that different from Sonic Drift 1 other than better 8-bit graphics, new tracks, and other characters you can play as too. Again, this is just another Sonic spin-off game that was made just to keep Sonic in the public eye at the time. But this game isn't really loved either, much like its first game counterpart. Sure, there's some aspects of the game that's slightly better than the first one, but it still doesn't make the game any better really. So with the Sonic Drift series, it's obvious that Sonic had a very rough start to the racing game scene, unlike other game franchises like Mario, whose racing game really made a new subgenre of mascot kart racing games. But for Sonic, it didn't really work for a number of reasons. First of all, these games barely function, but the big reason as to why it didn't work was mainly because Sonic was in a car, and nobody liked the execution of that, let alone the concept, because, well, you can have more fun from the main Genesis games at the time by running on foot in those. In fact, there's actually a 2-player mode where you are racing in those games, which actually those are way better than this. So with that, the Sonic Drift series would not receive any kind of follow-up ever again due to being critically panned and not received well by audiences. So by this point, we're in the late 90s and Sonic is still trying to get his footing in 3D, and the last attempt at it was... well, it wasn't really the best one. So what did Sega do and try to get Sonic in 3D on the Sega Saturn? Well, there was only one solution to do. You get somebody else to do it. The year is now 1997. The Sega Saturn is absolutely trying its hardest. While other Sega games were released onto the Sega Saturn, Sonic, however, was still trying to get his own footing on here for an actual 3D title. Unlike the last attempt at making Sonic in 3D, being Sonic 3D Blast, 2 Sonic games would release in 1997 on the Sega Saturn, the first one being a collection called Sonic Jam, and the second one being a new 3D game releasing that holiday. This game would be a racing game made by Traveler's Tales, the same people who made Sonic 3D Blast. Oh, this should be good. That game was Sonic R. This would end up being the first Sonic racing game on console, and unlike Sonic Drift, Sega got rid of the cars, so instead of cars, everybody besides Eggman and Amy is now on foot. I might not have been alive then, but I'm sure a lot of people were definitely excited to say the least about this. I mean, a Sonic racing game on console first of all, and then finally a proper Sonic racing game where the characters are actually on foot and running, and to top it off, it's in 3D. This all looks really exciting at first glance, but then the announcer lady says go.
No!
Then I think the excitement goes away after that. Okay, so while Sonic R might have had Sonic & Co. out of the cars and on foot running, on paper that sounds really freaking awesome, but in practice in the 90s, especially on the Sega Saturn, it didn't really end up working out all the best. Sonic R is the definition of a mixed bag for some people. On one hand, you got the people who like it and think it's a really decent and fun racing game. But then there's a good majority that thought it was absolutely terrible and a horrendous of a game to release on the Sega Saturn. And there was a good reason as to why they say that. The characters are very slippery and everyone is like a tank to control. Not to mention, to progress and unlock characters, you gotta get coins and enough rings to unlock the Chaos Emerald doors, and it's really hard to do when your character feels like a tank to move, especially since you have to turn the characters all the way around to back up. But when it comes to Sonic R, that's just about all the negatives that are truly there for this game, and it does kind of make it stack up that makes people hate this game. Sure, the gameplay may not be that fun at first, but after a while when playing it and you learn the special abilities of your characters and the tracks, this game is actually kind of fun. Now, I know a lot of you aren't really going to agree with me on this part, but I actually really like Sonic R. I've had a lot of fun with this game. Sure, it's no unsung masterpiece or something that gets video essays written about it, but when you look at it for what it is, it's a pretty fun racing game in comparison to something like Sonic Drift where, well, it's Sonic Drift. Make it stop! The gameplay is definitely a case where you have to get used to it a lot. I feel like I'm gonna be saying that a lot about Sonic games. But when you finally do learn the tricks, shortcuts, there is some fun to be had. But this is not how you make a 3D racing game. While the gameplay of Sonic R might not be a masterpiece, one thing that certainly is a masterpiece 100% is the soundtrack of this game. My goodness, is it so good. I kid you not, this OST from Sonic R is easily top 5 Sonic soundtracks for me. Heck, top 10 video game OSTs of all time. We'll push it that far if I have to. Every track from this OST is wonderful in every way. Can You Feel the Sunshine, Living in the City, Back in Time, Work It Out, Diamond in the Sky, of course the classic Supersonic Racing, and the best song out of the entire soundtrack being number 1. Each track from TJ Davis and Richard Jakes is an incredible piece of music that they made. It has that perfect 90s sound and feel to it. Like, you listen to each song and you can just feel the 90s nostalgia crawling in. It's so strong even I can feel it, and I wasn't even born yet. If you have never listened to the Sonic R OST, please check it out. It's truly a good soundtrack whether you like the game or not. The OST definitely won't leave you disappointed with its, how do I describe this soundtrack again? Pure positivity. And if not, then cheer up, man. Overall, while Sonic R isn't the best nor worst Sonic racing game, it's not what one would call the best at all. This game definitely was a step up from Sonic Drift, but the bar was already very low to pass. But this game does have some pretty fun tracks to play on, a good amount of characters to play as featuring Metal Sonic, also for the first time ever a Metal Knuckles. This game was even the first and only time we see the Tails doll in the Sonic games, and of course Super Sonic was here as well. A pretty decent cast of characters here to say the least, so overall Sonic R, while no perfect racing game, it definitely was a step up from the Sonic Drift games that came before.
So after a big step up on the 3D ground like that, where the heck do we go from here? Well, the only way to get up off the ground from here is to catch the wind.
After the release of Sonic R, there wouldn't be another Sonic racing title for a number of years. There would be a port of Sonic R to the GameCube via Jim's Collection, but that's just a port of a previous game. An actual new Sonic racing game was still non-existent for a while. That is until the year 2006, when Sega would release a new Sonic spin-off game for the series, specifically a brand new Sonic racing game that would not only be released in at the tail end of an era for gaming, but would release on multiple platforms and not exclusively on a Sega console. And that would end up being the one and only Sonic Riders. Releasing February 21st, 2006 for the GameCube, OG, Xbox, and PlayStation 2, the Sonic series would receive a brand new racing game for the first time since 1997, in the form of an all-new styled Sonic racing game being Sonic Riders. Now here is where things start to kind of pick up a bit. First of all, unlike previous attempts of bringing Sonic into the racing genre of games, those attempts have been with a kart racer or being on foot. Those attempts obviously didn't end up working too well with how they were received. So for this new Sonic racing game, Sega took a different approach to it and had to shake things up and do something that hasn't really been attempted with other video game mascots when it comes to racing games, and that is simply taking a risk. Something Sega would do a lot actually in this era, for better or worse. Sonic Riders is unlike the previous Sonic racing games we've seen up to this point. Unlike the last two attempts at giving the Speedy Hedgehog a proper racing title, this game has no cars, no running on foot, none of that. Instead, this game does something new, something that actually wasn't done with many game characters before, that being Sonic & Co. are now on hoverboards. So Sonic Riders, while being very different from previous Sonic racing games, doesn't manage to get the racing gameplay right for this, well, racing game. And to answer that question, it really just depends on who you talk to, honestly. If you talk to a Sonic fan, they'll probably say this is where Sonic racing games peak, and no racing game to come from the future will ever top it ever. But if you talk to someone from more of a casual audience, they'll probably tell you that this game is more trash than the last trash that released from this trash. And the reason as to why many in the casual market will tell you that this game is trash is mainly because this game, you really gotta learn how to play before you get started. The tutorial section is very necessary for this game if you want to know exactly what you're doing, but the problem is no one can access it because it's kind of almost hidden away in the options menu. Why they chose this, I don't know. But much like Sonic R, once you play around with the game and learn how to do a lot of mechanics, you can have some really good fun here. Except this is more fun than Sonic R by a lot, of course. So first off, this game runs off the mechanic to where you have an air supply that allows you to hover and boost and drift with your board. If you run out of air, you gotta refill as much as you can, whether collecting rings, getting power-up items, or just simply stopping at the air pit stops. Another good way to get your air back in this game is the trick system that was also implemented here. This trick system has a lot of depth into it and also is just really fun too. I'm not going to get into it too specifically right now because you've heard this talked about a million times before, but to sum it up, this trick system is really darn good. And also there's a good risk reward system too. The more tricks you do in the air, you can get yourself a sweet X rank, and basically you can get more air back with the higher tricks that you do. And you can hold the button down to charge up your air jump whenever you go off a ramp. This trick system is very nice. It was introduced in the Sonic Riders series, and honestly, this trick system is one of the many reasons why people love the Sonic Riders series so much now. There's also even multiple different racing types as well with your characters like speed, flight, and power. Each of these give whatever character you're playing as an advantage when racing because the track has spots for these characters to use their abilities. Not to mention the racing in these games is really just a whole lot of fun. And honestly, if you haven't played Sonic Riders, I'd definitely give this game a chance. This is genuinely where Sonic racing games started to go up in terms of gameplay. Also on a side note, this game's art style is also unlike the other racing games. Here we see Sonic & Co. have new cosmetics on for this game to give it that sort of groovy type of vibe with the new hoverboard sort of style that this game was going for. Here is where we'd see the introduction of the iconic Riders design for Sonic that many would go on to love for many years to come, myself included. Also new characters joining in too, being the Babylon Rogues. Those characters are Jet the Hawk, Wade the Swallow, and Storm the Albatross. Not to mention this game has not the most amount of tracks in the world, and while some of them are just varied versions of the other, there is a good wide cast of characters to play as here, with some unlockable tracks and characters, even with the inclusion of other Sega characters too, like Knights and Ai. Also, since we're talking about Sonic Riders, we gotta talk about the animations of this game. My gosh, I am really not kidding when I say this is probably the most expressive Sonic game I've ever seen. And we have games like Shadow Generations where that's the most expressive Sonic game to come out in 10 years. This game though, it still probably takes the winner for most expressive. The way the characters' faces look are so nice, and the expressions can be maybe over the top at times, but for the cartoony style this game was going for, it works. And now before we move on, here's a fair share of awesome faces from this game. Now, as much as I've given a number of positive things to say to Sonic Riders, how did gamers and critics respond to this game back then?
You already know the answer to this.
Yeah, while a number of people will talk positively on this game now, unfortunately critics in 2006 tore this game to shreds with low reviews and panning this game with honestly pretty unfair scores in retrospect. But it was Sonic in the 2000s, so why wouldn't anyone slander it? As much as I did love this game, I'll give casuals and critics this. The mechanics in this game are a little bit tricky to get the hang of. This game really is one you need to spend some time with before you can start to really get good at it. Like I said before, the tutorial is very mandatory for this game, but for some reason it is still hidden away in the options menu, but I promise you, once you find it and you learn the mechanics, trust me, you will have a better time with this game. But the thing that sucks about this tutorial being hidden is that most casuals are not going to find it, so once they're thrown into the races, they have no idea what to do or how the mechanics work, so it makes sense as to why this game got the reception it did. But looking past the somewhat difficult learning curve, Sonic Riders was overall a really well-made game that still holds up many years later. The racing is fantastic and very fun to play, tricks are so satisfying to pull off, even rewarding you if you take the risk and do more tricks.
Wait, ignore that.
As well as you got a wide variety of boards and gears to choose from, like air shoes and even the Chaos Emeralds as well to go supersonic. All in all, Sonic Riders, while not loved back then, this game was a massive leap in Sonic racing games and genuinely was a great turn for the Sonic series in terms of racing games. And it showed the future of racing games could be really cool if they stick with this gameplay in the future. But we're not quite done with 2006 yet. Let's fast forward to November, where another Sonic game would release. And no, this is actually a video where we're not talking about this one for once. Nope, I'm talking about Sonic Rivals. Releasing November 16th, 2006, just 2 days after Sonic 06 released, Sonic Rivals would make its way to the Sony PSP as another Sonic spin-off racing game. And it's, I don't know how to feel about this, and I'm not even gonna lie. So Sonic Rivals, unlike previous Sonic racing games, it's not a kart racer nor a hoverboard racer. Instead, this game goes back to the Sonic R route and has Sonic & Co. racing on foot. Except this time, since we're on a PSP, the foot racing is now in a 2D perspective. And this is interesting, to say the least. It's not bad, but it's certainly odd that this is the first decision made for the first Sonic PSP game. The 2D racing can be fun at times once you finally learn the mechanics. It's very hard to get into whenever you first play it. Again, it's not bad, it's just more or less okay. And that's mainly the reception this game got back then, is that it was just alright. Now, just because I say that, does that mean this game isn't fun? Not so, actually. On the contrary, Sonic Rivals is actually a really fun 2D racing game. It has its own little charm to it. Sure, it's nothing groundbreaking or anything, like, say, Sonic Riders or anything, but at the same time, this game is really just a whole lot of fun. I would definitely give this game a try with all the characters. Sure, all of them play just about the same, but still, there's its own little fun to it whenever you're just racing in this 2D environment. And also, you got some power-ups and special abilities, too, that the characters can have. And these power-ups can really give you a good advantage whenever you're trying to make a comeback, or if you want to keep your opponent at bay. Oh, I think I beat the system, guys! The game does have a story mode as well, where Eggman turns everybody to cards. Yeah, I know, I'm just as confused as you are. But I will say one more thing with the story mode, that is it gave us some pretty cool expressive text box renders, a trend that would definitely not have a downfall later on. Not to mention this game has a really nice soundtrack and also a very neat looking box art with renders of the characters, in my opinion, some of the best of the 2000s. Overall, while Sonic Rivals isn't the most well-known Sonic racing game out there, you've definitely played the Flash game though, I'll tell you that. It definitely does have its place in the number of Sonic fans out there that played it back in the day on the PSP. This game wouldn't really leave much of an impact on the Sonic racing game scene, mainly because it was just a PSP game, and unfortunately it didn't really end up selling that many copies in the end, so this game would just end up being a one-off series on the PSP. Is what I would say if this wasn't Sega we were talking about here, where they saw this and said, let's give it one more shot. I know this was really random to do an A and B in the middle of the video, but I really wanted to make a race to win A and B, alright? Let me have fun! So within the span of releasing the first Rivals game in 2006, Sega and Backbone teamed up once again to release Sonic Rivals 2 on November 17th, 2007. And it's basically Sonic Drift all over again. Same game, new stages, more characters, cool music, and all the other same stuff, just a tad bit different. In terms of gameplay, yeah, it's still the same. Most of the same racing mechanics are still here in this game, except with a few gimmicks like one, you are racing in a barrel now. This game again is very similar with the Sonic Drift games, where the first game comes out and exists, then the second one comes out, and it's just the same thing, but with more content, and some additions and little changes here and there too. But hey, the cutscenes have fully voiced dialogue now.
Well, look who it is, Knuckles and Rouge. You two on a date or something?
Knock it off, Sonic.
Well, I guess that's canon now. Overall, the Sonic Rivals games, while it's just a simple little PSP spin-off game series that just exists and is alright in its own way, but with that said, they are still two great racing games that I would actually really recommend to you guys that are just a whole lot of fun, and genuinely, just give them a try if you can. It really didn't leave an impact on the world of Sonic racing games like some previous ones have, although the reputation is kind of not that good. But it wouldn't be too long until Sega would come out with a new Sonic racing game that would even defy gravity itself. Releasing January 8th, 2008 for the Wii, and also oddly enough at the PlayStation 2 for some reason, Sega would release a new entry in the world of Sonic racing games, that being Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. This game would obviously be, as you can tell, a sequel/follow-up to the first Sonic Riders game released in 2006. While that game might not have been received too well by critics and some audiences, there were a good chunk of Sonic fans that I'm sure were very excited to see a follow-up to the Sonic racing game series that truly made Sonic stand out in the terms of the racing game genre. I mean, maybe, I don't know, I was like 3 years old when this game came out, so how was I to know? So Sonic Rider Zero Gravity. When you first look at it, you'd assume this game would be very similar to the first Sonic Riders game in terms of art style, gameplay, and even cast of characters. And for the most part, upon booting up the game, yeah, everything is about the same, from character designs to cast of characters, as well as even a story campaign is here once again too, much like in the first one. Not to mention the new epic theme song! Also, wait, what is this menu theme? It's so simple, it's so perfect. Now on to the gameplay of Sonic Rider Zero Gravity. Alright, time to start racing. Oh, here comes a trick ramp. Time to go crazy and get a sweet, sweet X rank and wait, what? Okay, so yeah, if it wasn't obvious enough from the million times you've heard this talked about on YouTube, Sonic Rider Zero Gravity is very different. Okay, that's all. Time to move on to 2009. So just because this game's whole gameplay might be very different than the first game, does that mean it's bad? Not so, actually. On the contrary, when at first playing, you might think it's completely terrible for changing what already worked well and changing to a lesser version of it. But when you toss that mindset aside and actually mess around with the game, there is some fun to be had with this new gameplay style with new mechanics in the racing. Oh, also, it would help wonderfully if you didn't play with this. For the love of, would you please just turn? So what exactly is different this time around for Sonic Rider Zero Gravity in terms of gameplay? Well, first of all, unlike the first game, the trick system is gone and is now time-based on when you jump off the ramp towards the end, and depending on how much speed you have with your character. Also, instead of having a boost that consumes your air up when used, instead there is now the gravity mechanic, which is kind of this game's whole thing, that being gravity. What this is that you use it during races in two ways. One way is called the gravity dive, which is meant to be this game's boost replacement to get around sharp turns, as well as speed up in some areas. There are some other changes to the Rider's gameplay that were made here as well, like upgrading your gear to go faster, or getting the ability to have the ability to do what your character type is and such. Yeah, this part of the gameplay I'm not a fan of. So with this gameplay change for Sonic Rider Zero Gravity, how did critics and audiences respond to this game? They raised the scores by just a little bit, that's it. So yes, while Sonic Rider Zero Gravity in retrospect isn't all that bad and is a pretty decent racing game that isn't anywhere near the same level as its predecessor, it's still fun to look back on and play. But the time it came out, it unfortunately was not very well loved, especially considering most people would play this game with the Wiimote and not think to play with a GameCube controller instead. The Wiimote controls is what really hurts this game for many because they're just utter garbage. It isn't like Mario Kart Wii where the whole racing system is built around it, where in this game, it's taking something that was meant for controllers like the GameCube or the PS2 and making it centered around motion. It just doesn't work. Thankfully though, there are options. One, like I said previously, use a GameCube controller or a classic controller. Two, there's also the PlayStation 2 version of this game you can play as well. So all in all, Sonic Rider Zero Gravity, while looked back upon as another decent Sonic racing game, it unfortunately was not well received when it came out and didn't do any favors in terms of the world of Sonic racing games due to its low scores and bad reviews it got. And unfortunately, the same thing would go for the main Sonic games to follow in 2008, those being Sonic Chronicles and Sonic Unleashed. Both of these two games were absolutely panned for a reason you know by now. Unleashed for its werehog gameplay and other issues, also Chronicles for, well, the only Sonic-related things to be really received well in 2008 were two spin-off games, first one being Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and then Sega Superstars Tennis, a follow-up to the previous Sega Superstars game for the PlayStation 2. So after the negative reception around the Sonic Riders games, the only thing Sega and Sonic Team could do was just move on and make more games that would hopefully be received well. So after 2009 was another meh year for Sonic, where the only thing that was received well positively was the follow-up title Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games, and a new Genesis collection for Sonic and other Sega games being the now iconic Sonic's Ultimate Genesis collection. Of course, there was the infamous Sonic and the Black Knight that was released as the main Sonic release for that year, and well, you could probably get the idea. So by this point, Sonic is truly reaching a new low, and is just becoming a dog pile of bad reviews and a mockery for consistent bad titles released. So needless to say, Sega and Sonic Team are definitely in a puzzling situation, to say the least. But not all hope was lost, because after the release of Sega Superstars Tennis in 2008, Sumo Digital would approach Sega about an idea they had for a new game featuring the Sega characters, and that idea was for them to be in a racing game. Fast forward through a prototype that would have made the game very different, and therefore, the turning point for the world of Sonic racing games would be released. And that game would be... Actually, I'll let this guy take it over.
Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing!
Beautiful. Releasing February 23rd, 2010 on all major consoles of the time and PC with 2 remakes thrown in there as well, from Sega and Sumo Digital, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing would release and proceed to be the turning point for the world of Sonic racing games. Unlike previous Sonic racing games, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing featured not only the Sonic cast of characters playable, but featured in this game, much like the title states, the other cast of characters in the world of Sega would be here for the racing experience too. From Monkey Ball to Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, to even the old mascot Alex Kidd himself, just to name a few. A lot of Sega characters besides Sonic were here. The last game being Sega Superstars Tennis, while had a decent roster, it was still a little smaller compared to this game's amount of Sega characters. No Knights though for some reason. Don't know why, just because. Sega, how could you do this to me? This game's character roster is very wide and has a number of fun characters to play as. Fun fact, if you even got the Xbox 360 version of this game, you would get the ability to play as Banjo and Kazooie exclusively for this version. And apparently early in development for the Wii version, Mario was planned to be playable here, but unfortunately Sega denied the idea so it wouldn't, quote, cross-contaminate with the Mario and Sonic Olympic series. Honestly, Sega really missed an opportunity with this. They would have made this game even cooler, having a character exclusively available on one console version of the game. Really, it was a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. Like, they could have had Mario for the Wii, Banjo and Kazooie on Xbox, and for PlayStation they could have done maybe Kratos or Nathan Drake. That sounds awesome just thinking about it. It's unfortunate that they didn't get further with this idea, but well. No matter what version of the game you had, there was still a great wide variety of Sega characters to play here. Not to mention a great number of racetracks and missions to play too that give you in-game currency to unlock more racers, racetracks, and upon replaying this game again, apparently you can buy extra music tracks that can be played in the background whilst racing. To go on a side note real fast, I had no idea this was in here for so long, and when I found out this was here, it was so cool to me of getting the ability to play other music tracks while racing. There's a great number of tracks from all kinds of Sega games here, and of course you got the great selection of Sonic music here too from games like Sonic R, Sonic Rush, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Sonic Heroes, even Sonic CD is here too, and upon downloading the DLC, you can even get Space Gadget from Shoutout the Hedgehog 2005. While I went for more of the Sonic tracks when playing, this was such a cool feature that I didn't even know was here. The simple idea of selecting a music track before a race is so cool to me. I think the reason why is because I've only ever heard one song that played in the background of each race for years, so I guess that makes it more cool for me, I don't know. But it kind of makes me think now, why go through this trouble of making an original OST when you can just really do this? I know of course an original OST for games is the more preferred option, and there are some really cool original tracks here in this game like the banger that is the main menu theme and the nice and chill results theme. And while those are great tracks, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I don't think I've seen any other racing game do this, let alone a mascot kart racer. But MP3 selection aside, let's get back to the main game itself, and let's ask the million-dollar question. How was this game in general? It had the content, but did it perform and deliver, especially since it had Sonic in a car again, and we all know what happened last time they did this. Well, to say the least, this game was and is fantastic! Sure, at first glance you might think, but Sonic plus car equals bad, Supercon. How is it fantastic at all? It's Sonic Drift all over again. Well, no, not at all actually. And I'll give you 3 good reasons as to why. First up, this game actually functions. 2, this game actually functions. And 3, it's just so much fun, man. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing is by far one of the best Sonic racing games to ever exist in the franchise, and we've had Sonic Riders exist already. Sure, this game can look like your average mascot kart racer that attempts to ride off Mario Kart's success, but when you actually play it, this game is truly a great time. The racing is so much fun with fast car gameplay, fun items to use to get the upper hand and try to make it to first. Another kind of item that makes its grand debut here in this game is the All-Star moves, where when in last place or really far back in the race, each character will get the ability to power up and use what's called their All-Star move, where they use a certain power or weapon from their own series to breeze their way through the racers and dash up to first place. The tracks are nice and really varied too, that make each of them great to race on with plenty of shortcuts to find to gain an advantage on other racers, and the scenery are all from the games that these characters are from that all look very nice. And it seems many critics and general audiences thought the same thing as well back then, because Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was the first Sonic racing game that was very successful among critics and audiences. It shows too, with the game selling 1.07 million copies by March of 2010, and that's impressive considering it sold more within a month than Sonic Riders ever did. And it makes sense why. Not only was this a great racing experience and really fun to play, but it was this game that managed to really give Sonic a fun racing game for everyone to enjoy this time around. Normally when it came to Sonic racing games we've talked about previously, there was always something that didn't make anyone want to play it or made people not recommend it at all, whether it was Sonic R's not so good controls or Sonic Riders' lack of good teaching on how to play the game. But for Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, that was not present here. It's fun and simple for everyone. You're racing cars as Sonic and Sega characters and have a fun time while doing so. Sure, Sonic is in a car again, but who cares this time around? It's actually so much fun here. Sonic, focus on the road. And that's the goal with racing games at the end of the day. That is making them fun. Mario Kart had achieved this multiple times and managed to make each kart racer so much more fun than the last. Now Sonic had his own kart racer with Sega characters, themes, and tracks. The racing is so much fun. While yes, simple, and like other racing games, the tracks graphics and what they have to offer with fun racing is what really brings out the fun in this game, along with playing as your favorite Sega characters. All in all, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was and is genuinely a fantastic Sonic racing game that was the true turning point for the Sonic racing games in the Sonic franchise. So with this new style of Sonic racing games introduced here, you might think the next Sonic racing game would be a new kart racer evolved, right? Well, not quite, because later on in 2010, we'd get one last hurrah for the Sonic Riders series for the 7th generation of gaming, and that title would be the one and only Sonic Free Riders. And unfortunately, that's not in a positive connotation. Releasing November 4th, 2010, Sonic Free Riders would release exclusively on the Xbox 360 as the first and the last Sonic Connect game. And well, that experience of a turning point for the racing games was short-lived. Okay, so to get straight to the point, remember how with Sonic Riders Zero Gravity it changed a lot from the original Riders that in retrospect makes the game racing a whole ton of fun? And in Zero Gravity they changed it with new mechanics and get rid of the fun depth of the racing? Well, in Free Riders we're doing something entirely different now, having fun. No! So like I said, Sonic Free Riders was the first and only Sonic Connect game to ever release, and for a good reason as to why. The Connect already had its own reputation in the gaming landscape for its attempt at trying to ride off the Wii success with its motion controls, and instead of playing with just one arm with a Wiimote, the Xbox 360 Connect tried to do a new thing as to where you play the game with your body, and this was terrible. All because input on the Connect is simply non-existent, thus making any game you'll play on Connect just not enjoyable in the slightest and really ruin your experience, because when you thought you did a movement input for any game here on the Connect, turns out no input was registered at all whatsoever. Heck, in my experience, I can't even get past the friggin' title screen on some of these games because of how horrendous the Connect is. So you can imagine, when Sega decided to make a Sonic Riders game for the Connect, you can likely tell this was not going to end well. And oh man, it certainly didn't. So as I said previously, the Connect doesn't read your input well at all in these games, and Sonic Free Riders is no different. There's times where you try to use an item like shake a can or throw a rocket while racing, and half the time it won't even register at all, therefore you flailing around like an idiot. Even trying to navigate the menus is a chore. Sometimes you want the menu to go one way, and if you move your hand slightly to the left, it'll take you back to the left when you want to go right. Or even when you want to grab your gear part or track, or even select your character, it'll just keep going back to the left. Stop doing that! Oh, how could we forget when it just won't let you navigate the menus for like 5 minutes? Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. What was I going on about again? Even doing something as simple as turning, rail grinding, jumping, or even trying to do a boost, it will hardly even register at all, because your inputs are barely making it through this cheap piece of plastic. And this is why Sonic Free Riders has the horrible reputation it has now. This game has been torn to shreds for years now because of its horrendous racing, all because of the Connect's lack of functionality. It sucks that this game bombed as much as it did, because there is actually one way to have some fun with this game, and that is during the screen where you get on your gear, if you stand perfectly still for some reason, your inputs will now be registered better. Also, if you stand at a slight angle and not just straight sideways, your experience will be better. And this is not a joke, I tried this myself, it actually works. Sonic Free Riders can actually be kind of fun, ladies and gentlemen. But then the game goes right back to its regular shenanigans 2 minutes later, so no, you entirely cannot have fun with this game. This sucks for Free Riders because this game genuinely could have been a great game. Really, another Riders game with no gravity gimmick, just classic racing. Even the story takes a hit here. It isn't like the previous games at all, but it still could have been something great. The gameplay foundation is here, there's some cool items, the graphics are nice, OST is great. A lot of problems would be fixed if the game had the option for controller support, and not only be exclusive for Kinect gameplay only. But I will. Now, I'm not saying Sonic Free Riders is a hidden gem or anything. No, the game is still fundamentally flawed because of the way it turned out, but it sucks to see something as great as the Sonic Riders series have such a downfall, especially since in retrospect, it has quite the fan base with it. So with that, Sonic Free Riders would be torn to shreds by critics and audiences for its terrible Kinect controls that ruined the game by a lot, and truly was a low point in the Sonic racing game scene. So when you hit rock bottom for racing with one franchise and succeed with another the exact same year, what do you do in that situation? Answer: you transform it into something amazing. After the commercial flop that was Free Riders in 2010, and looking at the numbers and reception for the Sonic racing games in the recent years, it's safe to say that Sega took one look at the charts and saw the one that outsold them all and said,
"Ooh, more money."
So after seeing which one was the better option in terms of actually selling well, Sega and Sumo Digital would team up once again and started work on a new Sonic racing game. Fast forward through Generation success in 2011 and releasing November 16th, 2012 on all consoles of the time, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed would release. And once again, it would be here we would see another good turning point for the world of Sonic racing games. I mean, it was needed, just look at what the last title was. Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed, if it wasn't obvious, is the follow-up title to the very well received and very fun Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing that was released 2 years prior. After Tom Clark, the producer of the game, pitched the idea of a transforming vehicle racer, they immediately were on board with the idea, and thus, here we are. This game really is how a sequel for a racing game should be done. From the new ideas, extended character roster, more tracks, and now a fully original and banger OST. While I talked about how much I love seeing Sega All-Stars have tracks from the original games playable in the background, but Transformers OST is next level. The music here is truly some of the best game racing music to exist, probably next to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with its amazing live instruments within its OST. To talk more on what all was here in Transformed, this game's character roster is back and has many more characters from beloved Sega franchises. Knights is now here, Thunderhead from Golden Axe makes his grand return after being absent previously, Vice from Skies of Arcadia, and many more. In fact, while in development, there were supposed to be 2 other characters planned for the game as well. One of them was supposed to be Sackboy. Sumo approached Sony about adding Sackboy in as a guest character, but Sony denied it because Sackboy got his own kart racer, so they didn't see the point. But one more fun fact, you can actually find a mugshot of Sackboy in the files of the 3DS version of the game, so close enough, I guess. One other character that was considered for the game was in fact Bayonetta, which really could have been a really cool addition because she's a very popular Sega character, but alas, the developers rejected the idea because they were scared the game's age rating would go up if she was in the game, which does kind of make sense because it would be her Bayonetta 1 design, but it's just kind of funny because years later Sakurai would say, screw the rating, she's in Smash, ladies and gentlemen. But not to worry, we still got 2 more guest characters in the final game, those 2 being Wreck-It Ralph and Danica Patrick? Okay then. With a new mechanic being introduced in this sequel to having more cast of characters here and tracks to race on, how was Sonic and All-Stars Racing transformed? Needless to say, this game is once again how a follow-up to an already great racing game should be. All-Stars Racing Transformed, when it released in 2012, would be met with very high positive reception from critics and audiences, getting scores higher than Sega All-Stars from critics and fans. While it wasn't the biggest jump in scores, it still was an improvement, and a good reason why. Transformed is genuinely a fantastic kart racing game that improves upon the first game by a lot. The racing in this game feels smooth as butter, from drifting to transforming to hitting opponents with items, and even tricks that are introduced in this game are so satisfying to pull off when done right, especially when you can get multiple ones done in a combo and get a big boost from it. Also, ones you can pull off while transforming your vehicle mid-race to get a transform boost, and it is so satisfying when you land that nice boost while transforming when racing. It's a really good system that was introduced here. Unlike when in Sega All-Stars, there was kind of tricks in that game, but in that game you just push the left bumper and idle animation triggers. Here there is a whole strategy to the tricks at whether or not to pull one off when going off of a ledge of the track, or trying to figure out the distance of air time to the ground. Will there be enough time to pull off a trick? The whole trick system in this game is very nice and super fun to get into. Of course, the racing in this game is fantastic as well. Cars feel faster than ever before and controlling them feels great, and like I said previously, the game feels smooth as butter when you're on console or PC. Drifting is fun to pull off, and then there's the transforming gimmick where you can turn into a boat or a plane, and those feel great too. While the aircraft transformation is a little iffy to me personally, they're fun, but sometimes they can have their moments. But they can still be fun from time to time. And the boats here are a lot of fun too. I do really prefer the boats more than the aircrafts. They can feel a little slippery at first, but then again, that's kind of the point as well because it's a freaking boat. All in all, the transforming gimmick in this game is truly outstanding and is a great step up from the previous game. The tracks are as fun as ever in this game as well, with some tracks even changing mid-lap to allow the transforming gimmick to be able to occur in some instances. It's really cool because it can really throw you in for a loop sometimes while racing, and it does a good job at keeping you on your toes. The racing and transform managed to really be a massive step up when it came to Sonic kart racing games. And now one more big thing for Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed, and that being the best thing that really caught my eyes back when I was a kid. His quills move in the wind! However, while Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed was good and did improve a number of things, I will say this. There are some things that it does that are kinda worse than the original All-Stars Racing game. For instance, one thing being that the items in this game are kind of bad here. Don't get me wrong, they can be fun, I guess, but they're just really weird. Like blowfish, wasps, a catching glove, also ice balls too. Okay, well that one kind of makes sense because you could throw them. It's not that these items are terrible or anything. It's just that, why the change? The previous game's items were just a lot better in my opinion. You had a shield that was actually from the Sonic games, and rocket/boxing gloves to throw, traffic cones acting as your discount banana peel. They were just more fun to use than these. Here in Transform, the items do function and work, they're fine. But I don't know, man, these are just really weird. Even as a kid, I remember playing this for the first time on my Wii U and seeing these new power-up items and just thinking, what the heck is a blowfish? The only items that are really fun and transformed are the fireworks and ice balls, since those are projectiles. While the item change is really weird, I can look past it and still have fun, and I can also appreciate the effort to giving something more original here to this game. But one thing I cannot look past with the items here in this game is the all-star moves. Holy crap, what happened? To make this short and sweet, the all-star moves in Transformed are really bad. The ones in Sega All-Stars had their own flair to them, to let you know this was the character's super move. Like, let's compare. Sonic in Sega All-Stars Racing gets the Chaos Emeralds and flies out of his car and dashes through the track and hits enemies with his boost. So now let's go to Transformed, and here we see Sonic get the All-Star, and it just turns into the plane and he just spin dashes. Okay then. It's not the worst thing in the world that the All-Stars are a little downgraded, but I don't know, it just kind of takes away what made them special in the first place. It's the character's All-Star move from their own game. That's always been the idea for it. I don't know, it's just a little sad to see a bit of a downgrade on it, but I could see maybe why they did it so it wouldn't feel like they just copy and pasted it over or something. I can appreciate the effort, but these All-Stars were never it for me, even back when I was a kid. But looking past those minor things that I think Sega All-Stars does better than this game, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed is a fantastic racing game that many love to this very day, and it managed to improve upon the previous Sonic Kart racing game by a lot, and also managed to blow freeriders completely out of the water. Transformed really was a new high for the Sonic racing games, and showed that they can stand on their own 2 feet and have its own thing to make it less of a quote discount Mario Kart. Truly, this is where Sonic racing games have reached a new high. So with this amazing new racing game out there on all platforms at the time, including mobile and portables too, this game would be the Sonic racing game for quite some time. But as the years went on and games like Lost World, the Sonic Boom games, and eventually Sonic Mania and Forces would come out, in the course of 5 years since Transform launched in 2012, there was no new Sonic racing game ever released in the span of those 5 years. No new kart racer, no 2D running game, no riders game, nothing. The only thing to come close to a new Sonic racing game was the mobile title Sonic Forces Speed Battle that launched weeks before Sonic Forces did. And that game kinda was a racing game, but it was more like a Sonic Dash with multiplayer, if you get what I'm saying. Not really a fully fledged racing game. Throughout the 2010s, there was no new Sonic racing game in sight until March of 2018 at South by Southwest, when Sega showed a teaser for a new game coming in 2018. And the teaser showed footage of a car and sounds of the car starting, and then a silhouette of a logo with the iconic R from Sonic R, and the trailer ends hinting a new Sonic Kart Racer game was coming later on in 2018. Months later, another teaser trailer would be shown of Sonic and Shadow leaving a garage, and the game was shown off to be called Team Sonic Racing, and the game would be coming out later on in 2019. Fast forward through months of marketing, and by that I mean releasing just music tracks every week, with a gameplay trailer showcase every now and again, and on May 21st, 2019, the new Sonic racing game would release, being Team Sonic Racing, and come on! When Team Sonic Racing released in 2019, unlike the previous 2 kart racing games, Team Sonic Racing got lower scores and reviews from critics and fans. We went from 82% on Metacritic with Transform to 72% with Team Sonic Racing. And to be perfectly honest, it's 100% valid here. Team Sonic Racing is by far one of the biggest step downs when it comes to racing games. First of all, the racing in this game is very, very slow compared to the last few games where you're always on your toes, speeding around corners, trying to drift and get that boost to gain the upper hand, or finding shortcuts as well to get to the front of the race is all really non-existent here. Sure, you can drift and try to gain the upper hand here, but in comparison to its previous games, much like Marvel's Avengers, it all just feels so meh. The racing feels bland, you feel like you're only going 2 miles an hour and doesn't really feel like much of a race is going on. Instead, it feels like you're going for a nice, easy afternoon drive. The tracks aren't any better here either, mainly because they're all built around the team mechanic. That's the main gimmick of the game, which, spoiler alert, nobody's going to be playing because it's not really all that fun. And playing a single race is much more fun, because why would you play in a race of 3 when you instead you can race by yourself with other AI opponents? It all just feels really boring and uninteresting. Not to mention, it's hard to get into a game's racing when the items from said racing game are also pretty terrible as well. The items in this game are all the wisps, and they're pretty not so great either. You got the ones that are necessities, but then you got the ones where they're really useless entirely. This game as a whole just feels like nothing really. What's confusing to me is that it was made by the exact same people who made these two games before. It's like, what happened? It doesn't help that when this game released, the online was busted day one, and nobody was playing it at all by the time the game turned a week old. For one, busted online day one, and two, this game just isn't fun. This game really is the dictionary definition of discount Mario Kart. It's literally just Mario Kart with a Sonic skin, but honestly, Mario Kart is more fun than this. The reason why is because this game strips away anything fun that's come before. It's just lackluster by comparison. No transforming vehicles, no all-star moves. That's been replaced by the team mechanic boost that, again, no one's going to be using because the team mechanic isn't that much fun. No other Sega characters either, just Sonic characters now, which is why? I get that other Sega characters might not push as many sales as a Sonic exclusive kart racer will, but at the same time, couldn't you have just put them in there as extras or something alongside the new Sonic characters joining the roster here? I don't think it would have hurt the game at all, really. Even the opening movie feels lackluster. Don't get me wrong, the CG is beautiful, a number of shots from here are great and look outstanding. Also, the transitions are great, but be honest with me, which opening cutscene screams more confidence within the first few seconds? TSR or Transformed? You tell me. That's another thing. The opening movies from these Sonic racing games are all usually fantastic and scream confidence, especially Sonic Riders, Sega All-Stars, and really Transformed. Transformed, you have the Sega logo with the classic Sega sound, and then the sounds of engines revving, then the remix of the first game's main menu theme. As you can see the shots of these characters, then they're off to race. And that's just within the first few seconds. And then you compare that to TSR, you just see the massive difference. I know they can't just do the same thing again, but come on now. I also know a game's opening doesn't factor whether a game is good or not, but when you see what's come before, you just gotta look and say, what happened here? With TSR's opening here, there are no sound effects, no voice lines, nothing, just the mediocre Crush 40 song in the background. That's another thing about TSR. Half of this game's marketing was just the soundtrack. While most people will say this game's OST is the best thing to come from it, I will be fully honest here. It's not that good. I listened to a good number of tracks from here, and a good chunk of them are very uninteresting to listen to, really. Team Sonic Racing is truly by far one of the worst Sonic Racing games I've ever played. It really sucks for this game because on the surface, it's not a bad kart racer. It's fine, it functions, but what makes it bad is that the game isn't fun. It has nothing really to offer in terms of content that make you want to come back and play it. This was just a Sonic game that came out and was known as the Sonic soundtrack that came with the game. Team Sonic Racing is often referred to now as the Sonic Forces for Sonic kart racing games, to where if there is any new Sonic kart racer the future has, there is worry immediately that it could have a chance to be just like this mediocre monstrosity when it releases. So therefore, just like what happened with Sonic Forces, any excitement for a new Sonic kart racing game is immediately tossed out the window. I mean, it makes sense why. This is the game that made me leave Sonic for how disappointing it was. So as you can see, throughout the many years of Sonic racing games released, you can see that the games have all had their ups and downs, with the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and many different takes and styles on how Sonic should do racing games. Although the start of the racing games was a rough start with Sonic Drift, thanks to games like Sonic Riders and the first two Sonic All-Stars racing games, it was these games that we can get Sonic in a good racing format, and all of these games are all still very loved to this very day. It's unfortunate at how Team Sonic Racing really managed to cause the Sonic Racing game series to crash, but thankfully, Team Sonic Racing is not the end of the world for Sonic Racing games, because in 2024, a new Sonic Racing game was announced at the Game Awards titled Sonic Racing Crossworlds. This game actually continues the trend of using the R from Sonic R like in Team Sonic Racing, and as of recently, a closed beta test has been available to play. I myself and many other friends of mine have gotten the chance to play it, and with this beta test, I can say wholeheartedly this game has and will blow Team Sonic Racing out of the water. Not going to talk a whole lot on the beta here, but if you do want to hear me talk about it more, check out the Starfall Radio podcast where me and my friends, we all talked about the Sonic Racing Crossroads beta and our experience with it more in depth here. But to sum it up here from what I played in the beta, this game is awesome. And I think when the game is done and the team receives our feedback, I think we are in for a great experience. Not to mention with more content planned for the game that we may not be aware of, as well as Extreme Gear is back again, Sega characters are making a comeback, DLC characters are apparently a thing too as well. Sonic Racing Crossworlds has the biggest amount of potential to be the greatest Sonic racing game to date. And thanks to this beta, that claim has more credibility than it ever did with the initial trailer. The Sonic series has definitely had its fair share of spin-off racing games, from running to hoverboards to cars. Sonic has done a lot in terms of the racing scene, While Sonic racing games may not be as big as games like Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing, but no matter what kind of Sonic racing game there is, Sonic always manages to stand on his own 2 feet and being able to go toe-to-toe with whoever is willing to compete in the world of mascot kart racing games.